Hey guys, it's Joe from Greenlight Sound and greenlightsound.com here with a video about gain staging within your DAW using an analog style VU meter. And first of all, let's talk about why that's important. A lot of times when you get tracks to mix, you'll find them that they were recorded very hot, and when you try to play them, they'll clip. So I'll give you an example here. I'm just going to play the drums alone. Just the drum tracks, no bass, no guitars, no vocals, nothing else included, just drums. Here it is. Very hot. Clipping the main outputs here, overshooting 0 dB on the bus. Now, there's a lot of discussions about clipping within your DAW, and if you're not really clipping at your converters, it's not as big of a deal. And in fact, you'll see some pro mixers, if you see some behind-the-scene videos, where they clip on channels and leave it just like that. It's fine. But the main reason we want to avoid clipping, well, there's two really. One of them is the fact that if you're using analog style plugins, they have a sweet spot. And we'll look at that in a moment. It also has to do with controlling your levels using faders. If you're mixing with your faders and the tracks are really hot and you're pulling all your faders down 12, 16, 18 dB, or right off the bat, and mixing at that level, you'll find that your fader has a lot less resolution at this point than it does up near unity gain. In the same amount of space on your fader it takes to cover 12 dB from minus 24 to minus 12, and that same amount of space from minus 12 to minus 6 and minus 6 to 0, you have sort of more travel in the fader with less dB. So if you're doing really fine automation work later down the line, it's much easier to do up at the top near unity gain when you have much more resolution to work with. So the other reason is analog style plugins. And if I take a look at Slate Digital's Virtual Tape Machine manual, what you'll see is that we have calibration. And the calibration of VTM is negative 18 dBFS when the VU meter is at 0 dB. So that's a negative 18 calibration. That's the sweet spot. So when the VTM meter is at 0, that corresponds to negative 18 dBFS, which is what your digital meters are, your peak meters within your DAW. So another reason why that's important is because if you have noise modeled in your plugin, like VTM does, as noise is part of the important sound of tape, you want a good signal to noise ratio. And right here, this sentence, hitting 0 dB VU, the VU meter is 0 dB, which is equivalent to negative 18 dBFS, is the best way to maximize the tape sound, i.e. the best noise saturation ratio. As always, experiment and use yours. Of course, you could hit the tape harder and introduce some tape saturation and tape compression. But if you're looking for that sweet spot for the standard tape sound with the best signals to noise ratio, it is at negative 18 dBFS, which is 0 on the meters, the VU meters leading in. The VU meter you'll see me use in a moment is from PreSonus, but there's a couple others you could take a look at. Here we have LVL meter 1.1, which is free from LSR Audio. Comes in VST and audio units, no AAX though. VUMT, definitely AAX included for this one. This is a meter I see a lot of people use because it has some extra features that you don't find on some others. Two versions of this, the standard version and the deluxe version, which comes with some bells and whistles down at the bottom, high pass and low pass filters, a dynamic EQ, and a mono maker for the low end. But the standard one you'll get by on for the task we're looking at today. And like most good VU meters, it's you can calibrate it to 0 dB being whatever dBFS amount you want. And this one has the bonus of having the trim included, so you could do all your gain staging within this plugin itself. We're going to do it a little bit differently, which we'll look at in a moment. So back to Studio One, and we see Studio One's, or PreSonus, VU meter, which is an extra download but is free with Studio One. Has a couple things going on here. You have a phase correlation meter for stereo tracks, sensitivity that controls the ballistics of the needle within the VU meter, and then finally a scale, which does not default to negative 18. I made this my standard default now, but I believe it's either minus 12 or minus 6 for your calibration here. But I calibrated it so that 0 on the VU meter is negative 18 dBFS. We're going to start with the drum tracks here. I'm going to highlight the kick track, have that be playing by itself. Here it is, kick drum. very hot. So what we're going to do now is use clip gain to bring the level of the actual clip, the actual waveform down, which will then in turn bring the level down, hitting the VU meter. Trying to get right around 0. There we go. One thing I do want to mention about VU meters as well is that they are RMS style meters, not peak meters. So you're going to have some overshoot here. That's okay. You've got a little bit of headroom to work with. But you're sort of trying for an average level at that -18. Your peaks will not be -18. So in Studio One, I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to move tracks up and down, highlighted. S for solo, M for mute. So I just solo the next track. This is an Addictive Drums kick sound that came with this track. There we go. Snare top. Addictive snare. Snare bottom, I'm actually going to have this brought down a little bit. Hi-hat. Rack tom next. There we go. Floor tom. Great. Now the overhead tracks I have split into overhead left and overhead right, not a stereo single overhead track. So what I'm going to do in this case is open up both instances of VU meter, one for the left channel and one for the right channel. I'm going to highlight both of the overhead tracks and pull them both down at the same time. Move the clip gain at the same time for these so we can maintain the balance between the two tracks. If I try to do one at a time, I might end up with out of balance overhead tracks, which I don't want to go for. There we go. That's in the ballpark. Get rid of the VU meters now. And what you'll find now is that when we solo the drum tracks and play them, the level will be a lot lower than it was before. Now this is before any balancing is done as well, so I haven't pulled any of these faders down yet and actually done a rough mix at all, other than panning the overhead left and right. That's all I did so far. So you'll end up with even more conservative level hitting that bus eventually when I pull some of the tracks down. The hi-hat wouldn't be as hot as that. I wouldn't have the addictive and natural kicks both at unity gain, or the snare top, snare bottom, addictive snares all at unity gain. So that would bring the level down even more. If I went through that whole process throughout the entire track with all the guitar parts, bass parts, and vocals, you'd end up with a much more conservative level hitting your main output. And it's much easier for you to leave headroom. If you're sending it off for mastering, you want to make sure you always leave at least 6 dB of headroom for the mastering engineer to work with. So that's another benefit of having more conservative levels. If you guys have any questions about VU meters, gain staging, or anything else, hit me up in the comments below. Hope you learned something today. Happy mixing.